Almost everyone recommends becoming a flight instructor as your first job, including myself. But do you know what it actually takes to be a flight instructor? Stay tuned to find out. Welcome back, aviators. Hope you're enjoying this beautiful summer and getting some flying accomplished. If you're new to my channel, I take the mystery out of the aviation industry, so consider subscribing for more aviation content like this. In this video, I'm going to explain to you what the job of a flight instructor actually entails, how much you get paid, and help you make a decision whether this is the right first job for you. Let's get started. So you finished your flight instructor rating, you got your first job, and now you have your first student. What does the day of a flight instructor actually look like? Well, the first thing you have to understand is that your whole schedule is determined by your students. If you only have one student, you will only fly when they fly and at any time that their schedule permits. If you have more than one student, your goal will be to schedule them as efficiently as possible throughout the day to maximize your time. This can be challenging if everyone wants to fly in the morning before work or in the evening after work. Or you can have one student in the morning and one student in the evening, and then the middle of your day you have no flying. That's why getting your students to book a week or two in advance is a great strategy, not only to give you a schedule and constant flying, but it forces the students to book on a first come, first served basis. Once you have a lot of students, now you have to decide how many hours a day you want to work and whether you want to fly on weekends. Because this is your first job and you want to build time, I suggest being very flexible and giving your students a lot to choose from. When I was teaching, I taught from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. I wouldn't always teach for those full 12 hours, but it gave my students flexibility. However, some months I did teach for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 to 3 months straight. That was a choice I made, and I worked really hard because I wanted to build my hours and experience, but you can decide the schedule that you want for yourself. That is one advantage of being a flight instructor, is that you have some flexibility in your schedule. You will also have to teach ground school, usually twice a week in the evenings when people are off work. So when I was a flight instructor, in the summer months my days would start at 8 a.m. I would show up just before the first student, make a pot of coffee, check the weather, and when the student showed up, we would do the ground briefing. Each student gets a 2-hour slot, and you don't have much time to waste, and you have to run everything efficiently if you want to stay on schedule. After the briefing, we would do the walk around, or the student would do the walk around on their own if they're progressed far enough in their training. I would hop in and we would fly for approximately 1 hour. Then land, debrief, and by that time the next student is already waiting for you. So this would be my day, non-stop for 12 hours, and I would be able to teach a maximum of 6 students per day. I would have a snack or lunch in between briefings or walkarounds, and at the end of the day I went home, ate, and went to bed just to repeat all over again. In the winter months, I would be the complete opposite, where I would have only 1 or 2 students a day, which brings us to the topic of pay. So how much do flight instructors actually get paid? Well, you get a base salary, and the rest is paid per hour depending on the class of instructor that you are. Everyone starts out as a Class 4 flight instructor, making a base salary of about $700 a month, and then $30 an hour on top of that. When you upgrade to a Class 3 flight instructor, your base salary increases to about $1,000 a month and $35 an hour on top of that. And when you become a Class 2 flight instructor, it becomes $40 an hour. However, most people don't become Class 2 flight instructors because they move on to the next job. This is why it's important to schedule your students efficiently, because the more students you have in a day, the higher your pay. So if you take the average of busy summers and slow winters, let's say that average is 3 students a day and you teach for 5 days a week, then your annual salary is going to be $30,000 a year. Why so low? Well, because the $30 an hour you get is for flight time only. It's not for the full 2 hours that you spend with your student. If you had 3 students a day, taught for 6 hours, but only flew for 3 hours, you would only get paid $30 an hour for those 3 hours, and maybe a little bit for the ground briefings. Also, when you teach ground school, you get paid less for that. You don't get the full $30 an hour. That's why your salary can vary drastically from month to month, and season to season, and it all depends on your students, their schedule, and the weather. That's why I worked so hard in the summer months to offset the slow winters. Something else flight schools are starting to do is actually offer fixed salaries to flight instructors, which is completely new for our industry. This brings me to the final topic of things to consider before choosing to become a flight instructor. Because so much is determined by your students, you want to find a flight school that has a lot of students and very few flight instructors. This way there's less competition for students and you can build your hours quicker and make a livable wage. To find these schools, you have to be willing to move to smaller towns or communities. When I was teaching, I was fortunate enough to get a job at a flight school where I was the only flight instructor other than the owner, and I was able to get the majority of the students. After upgrading to a Class 3 instructor, I was teaching most of the students and running the school from morning to evening. Teaching so much really built my skills and knowledge, and my hours grew quickly. On average, I was teaching 550 hours a year, and I taught for 3 years. If you don't want to move, another strategy is to ask whether the flight school will hire you if you do your rating with them. This can benefit both parties, as the flight school will teach you to their standards and you will have a guaranteed job lined up. However, you might have less students at a busier flight school, fly less, and be offered a lower wage. The goal of flight instructing is to build 1,000 hours as quickly as possible, write your ATPL, and apply to the regionals or other smaller charter companies that will give you experience on a multi-engine aircraft like a King Air or Beech 1900. The final thing to consider is whether you even want to teach. Not everyone makes a good flight instructor or has the finances or ambition to get the rating. The industry is hotter than ever, and there are many entry-level jobs right out of flight school, so don't feel that you have to teach just because everyone says so. Being a flight instructor has a lot of advantages, and during my 3 years of instructing, I learned a lot, made some great friends, and improved my skills that I otherwise would not have been able to do. Learning to teach is a skill on its own, and you feel great pride taking somebody who has zero flying experience to a fully licensed pilot. You get to experience their joys alongside with them, from their first solo to overcoming challenges and walking away from a flight test with a giant grin on their face. There's no better feeling than that. So I hope this video gave you good insight into whether you should become a flight instructor. If you want more guidance or one-on-one mentoring, check out my Patreon page. As always, smash like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.